Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for spending a part of your Tuesday evening with us. Welcome to What About Your Friends? Connecting During COVID. I'm Sasha Ann Simons, host of Reset. Now, over the past year, we have talked a lot about navigating this really long period of being at home with our partners, our kids, and roommates. And we've talked about staying connected to our family members who live elsewhere, right? So what about our friends in that conversation? How has this long stretch of social distancing, how has it impacted our friendships? And how can we nurture those relationships until it's safe to gather like we used to? We're going to start tonight with some experts in friendship and mental health. And later we'll get some recommendations for Chicago area events that offer more than just another Zoom happy hour. Throughout the show, we'll be taking your questions too. So go ahead and drop your questions right there in the comments, and we're going to make sure that we get to as many of them as we can throughout the program. To start off, let us know in the comments, how are you tending to your friendships during COVID? So think of your real life right now. How are you doing it? How's it going for you and your friend groups? What score would you give yourself if you had to score yourself from, say, 1 to 5? What score would you give yourself as a friend right now? Now, for my first guests, we've got Dr. Jeff Greif. He's a professor at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. He's also the author of Buddy System, Understanding Male Friendships. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us is Dr. Julie Fraga. She's a psychologist and writer in San Francisco. Hi, Julie. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. And DJ Watson is an associate marriage and family therapist with Pinnacle Counseling right here in Chicago. Hey, DJ, welcome.
Hi, Sasha. Nice to be here. I listen to you on Reset all the time.
Oh, thank you so much. Good to hear. I want to start out, folks, by talking about the role that friendship plays in our life, right? Jeff, I'm going to go to you first. Give us some context here, right? Because this is really important. Tell us what we're actually getting from our friendships in the first place. What are we getting from friendships that's different than what we get from relationships with our families and our romantic partners?
We get a lot of bennies from our friendships. People with friends live longer, happier, healthier lives. Friends are there for us to give us feedback about ourselves. We can pick up and drop friends, which we cannot do with our family. And so that has a certain advantage and may have a disadvantage for some people. But I think it's important to look at the broader issue around social networking and how by being connected to friends, you have a constant feedback loop about your ideas, about your health, about areas of support, about things to do. So I think it's a wonderful benefit to have many friends. If they are from varied backgrounds, that can even widen your perspective on life.
Well, Julie, let's pick up where Jeff left off. I'm wondering, given what he just described, is there grief then around drastic changes in how we're now connecting with those friends since the beginning of the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think that, we have different types of friends. We might have friends that live far away, right? So you might have a friend maybe that you plan to see when you go home to visit family at the holidays, or maybe you go and meet a friend, on a trip once a year. We also have our work friends, our colleagues that we're used to seeing if we're working in the office, maybe our work besties. And so I think there's just a lot of loss and grief around losing those connections or having to adjust to the way those connections have changed. And we've never been through this before. So I think the landscape is very new in terms of how do we navigate this together.
Well, Julie, I was wondering, do we feel that right away? Or did it take some time to sort of set in I'm thinking with all the restrictions that have come along with COVID-19, right? I think many of us in the beginning thought, this is just going to be for 2 weeks. These stay-at-home orders, we're going to be back in no time. Of course, that did not happen. So did it take some time for us to start to really feel that, the disconnect?
Yeah, I think it depends, and it's probably different for each person. I think that, some of us tend to be a little bit more extroverted, meaning that we tend to get a lot of energy from our social interactions. And so I think people that might veer more towards extroversion, and also maybe people that live on their own, they don't have children that they're having to, kind of set up with remote school and also kind of work from home and navigate all that, might have felt kind of the pains of, these friendship changes more acutely in the beginning. But a year into it, I think we're all feeling it. And I, especially in my practice, see a lot of people just having a grief reaction to the anniversary time of the start of the pandemic. How much more of this can I take? I thought that it would, things would be getting better by now. And certainly we have a vaccine rollout, but it also seems like there are always new concerns around the virus that pop up that put into question when our lives, really will return to normal. So
absolutely. DJ, we talked about the beginning of the pandemic. We were told to do this thing called social distancing. We hadn't heard of that before. What are the emotional consequences of that, of social distancing?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I've noticed for a lot of people, and I think Dr. Julie touched on this, is the huge change, right? That continually those things that maybe we had in our life to help us keep balance, right? Going to the gym, meeting up with a friend here or there, going out to eat, working out, exercising, all of those things, right? All of a sudden we had a huge shift in the tools that we had in our toolbox to keep us balanced, right? And so I remind people that you probably felt a lot of uncomfortability. There was a lot of change in your life. And while that, sounds bad, inherently that probably means you were doing some other stuff good, right? The fact that I'm not managing, maybe perfectly during COVID-19 probably means that all of the skills I've built for life haven't inherently been to manage during COVID-19. Right? And so, there has been a shift, right? I think, the first thing is grounding, helping people get their feet underneath them and taking perspective, right? That, yeah, where I am today probably looks really different than where I was a year ago, even in the midst of the pandemic. There's been seasons, right? There's the season in March where we can't go outside. Then there's a summer where maybe we couldn't. Then there was holidays, and then there was an election season, right? And so even the skills that maybe really were helpful during the summer, I might really feel like I'm struggling now because all of a sudden I can't. So, yeah, I think there's been a lot of shifts for everybody, and it's about how do we find balance and perspective. Not that we're going to be back where we were 2 years ago, right? How do I get to a spot where I'm not at a 9 or a 10, I'm at a 7 or 8, and I can better manage some of those.
Yeah. A reminder to our viewers that we are taking your questions as well. So I hope that you are dropping your comments right there in the comment boxes right below this video on Facebook. We'll get to as many of them as we definitely can. I do want to turn to some questions that folks submitted when they registered for this event tonight. Now, some of the questions, when I look through them, there's really just a common theme, right? A lot of them really boil down to what is normal these days? Just people wanting to know what is normal right now. DJ, how common is it to fall out of touch with casual friends during COVID-19? That was a question from a viewer.
Yeah, I think again, in the context, that is normal, right? Maybe all of a sudden, some of those friendships that we maintained just through routine, right? Running into you at the office, you're my gym buddy, we do the play dates with the kids, right? Some of those I think will wane again because, our context of living is different, right? We're in a different time than we were before. So again, I talk with people a lot and I say, it's not about saying, how do I maintain everything exactly like it was? Most of us won't balance it. We don't want to be stuck in one spot, right? And so, with new context, how do I make different adjustments? I think, I've been doing a lot of that with people. A lot of people are very common to kind of fall out of balance, struggle with routine.
Julie, here's another question from a viewer. They ask, is it okay to not be in touch with friends as much? Like, am I a bad person for not reaching out as often as I used to? There's that guilt. There's that feeling of feeling like you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. And I think the answer is it okay to not be in touch with somebody as much as you were before? Absolutely. But it's like, how does that get communicated, to the other person based on maybe how close the friendship is? And also, how do we just cope with our own feelings of guilt, and not beat ourselves up because we're not able to be the friends that we were before? Everybody's kind of running on a little bit less these days. And also it's unique. We're running on less, maybe we have less energy, but we may need more, we want more connection. And so that's a little disjointed. It's a little bit incompatible, but absolutely extend yourself some grace and compassion. It's a tough time for everyone. So.
Well, Jeff, is it natural for long-term close friendships to wane?
It is natural for them to wane, and there's sort of like 4 classifications of friendships I've written about. There are must friends, people that you must stay in contact with. Then there are your trust friends, those who you run into and you tend to be close with them, but they're not in your immediate circle. Julie talked about just friends, people who you have as acquaintances at work. And then there are your rust friends, maybe your high school buddies that pull you back to the way you were when you were a kid. I think you need to struggle to stay in touch with your must friends. You have to do those. But as DJ was saying, you sort of lose those casual friendships that you have. I think we could also look at gendered roles too, because men get together and have shoulder to shoulder friendships, and women tend to feel more comfortable in face-to-face friendships. So for men who like to get together and do things, and it's often around sports, it's watching sports or doing sports, we like activities together side by side. We're going to maybe struggle more to reach out to our friends than will women who feel more comfortable in these kinds of Zoom meetings.
We're going to talk more about male friendships in a little bit. Jeff, thanks for bringing that up. Now, how to approach friends in these circumstances. That's something that also came up quite a bit with the responses that we got. Sticking with you, Jeff, I want your guidance for reconnecting with friends that you were once close with.
Well, it's really
how do you do that? How do you broach the subject?
Yeah, it's really not that different than it was before the pandemic, because we often had people that we now can follow on Facebook and can elect to get back in touch with. And that's the interesting thing about what the electronic platforms have done. And now we can get together more easily and see them. So I think it's imperative for people to take a risk. You will not make friends waiting at home for people to come to you. You have to reach out to people and or get involved in activities that you like, be it a chess team or a chess game or going to the basketball court or just taking walks around the park. You have to get out and reach out. People will not come to you unless you are open and willing to reach out to them.
Well, some viewers have weighed in on how they'd score themselves as friends. The question I asked at the very beginning of this program, Bruce on Facebook says, I've sent more texts since March 13th, 2020 than all previous texts combined. I think my score would be 4 or 5. Well, good for you, Bruce. That's awesome. Kenneth, though, he gives himself a 2. And Polly says, well, I'm a 0.05. She says, my friends are not tech savvy at all. Even a conference call can be difficult. Wow. DJ, I have another question here for you from a viewer. I think this viewer is speaking to my soul here because they say, I tend to be the one contacting friends and organizing activities, but I rarely see invitations from others. Is that a sign that my efforts are not welcome? Am I missing a hint? This person has been me. How do you approach this one?
Yeah, I think that can be really difficult, right? I think again in that friendship, right, that there is, again, a duality, right? That relationships aren't always balanced 50-50, and that can be okay, right? There's going to be some people who maybe are more the reach out type, or some who are less, right? Right. I'm in that side too, right? And so what I talk to my clients about is I say, the whole reason you have a friendship in a relationship with somebody is so you don't have to figure all this stuff out in your head, right? I don't have to figure it all out in myself. And I remind them that the relationships that are most meaningful to me, the ones that are the longest and the most sustainable, aren't the ones where things always went well. Hi, Millman, nice to see you today. There are the ones where there's been some conflict. There's the ones where we overcome some stuff, right? There's the ones where there can be some trust and understanding. And so one of the things I say is, move into a way of like, how might I appropriately say that to my friend, right? And they might not, I might say, hey, it feels like I've been reaching out to you a lot and we haven't really been connecting. Now, my friend might not all of a sudden just flip the switch and say, oh, well, I'm so sorry. Like, let me call you all the time. But again, if we can move into a place where we can have some hearing and understanding, they can better understand some of our needs. That relationship can have some more reciprocity for us, or even if it's better understanding of the environment for us. Oh, they're really struggling with kids or family, or they don't have time, right? We might be able to find some more balance. So I say, don't try to do it all by yourself, right? The whole reason you're in a friendship is because there's somebody else, right? Find some ways that feel comfortable and appropriate to share some of these struggles. Hey, I'm really struggling to connect with you. I really miss you. You might find that they are as well, and it's something else that you guys can relate on and connect on throughout this time.
Julie, what do you say to folks like Polly on Facebook? She says, I try, but my friends just aren't tech savvy. Polly's question mirrors another one that came in earlier this week as well.
I think in that case, it's kind of like if you want to connect with that friend, maybe getting a little bit creative, picking up the phone, seeing if they'll hop on the phone. Maybe, I've seen a lot of just kind of, returning to, kind of retro times during the pandemic, making cards, sending, a letter, different ways of communicating with people. If they're friends that are in town, just even dropping off a little bit, a little flower, bouquet of flowers or something, a little note on their doorstep, anything to let them know that, you're thinking of them.
Jeff, here's another question for you. Someone writes, I have several friends and family members with depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. When should I stop reaching out? What's a good way of saying, I've reached out several times, ball's in your court?
I think part of that decision is around what you've tried to do in the past, and maybe more importantly, what's the narrative that you want to write for yourself in relation to them. You can see yourself and write a narrative for yourself as someone who always reaches out and will continue to reach out, even if there's no feedback coming to you. Or you can write a narrative for yourself of, yeah, I tried, they didn't respond, so I'm going to step back. And I don't know what's in anybody's head to determine which of those narratives that they would like to pursue. I kind of like the first narrative of, I'm going to continue to pursue you until I get a firm stop pursuing me as a friend. So I think I would err on the side of love and inclusion and reaching out until I got clear signs that was not the best route to go.
Yeah, I think in the end, they'll remember the effort, right? And I think that's what's most important here. Rather than choosing to not reach out, then of course there's then the miscommunication and wires are crossed, and that leads to a whole other issue. Setting healthy boundaries, though, was another really broad category that came up as we surveyed folks getting ready for this event. A common question was about conflicts with friends that have different comfort levels about what's going on right now and gathering, right? So DJ, we got questions from people on both sides of this. One viewer said, my friends want to meet in small indoor gatherings, but I'm not comfortable until we're all vaccinated. And another said, how do you maintain longtime friendships with those who won't even form a bubble with you? What advice do you have for friends trying to navigate different opinions about what's actually safe right now?
Yeah. And I think, again, this is one of those things that, for better or worse, COVID has thrown in our laps, dealing with politics with family. And, it just is one of those things that comes to the forefront that maybe doesn't always in a way. So one, again, it might just be some new territory, right? It might be, a friend who I don't usually talk about maybe my health with, right? So, understanding that it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's okay, right? That sense of maybe uncomfortableness or, not necessarily feeling 100% connected is all right in the moment, right? I think also in that with trying to reach out and connect with friends, I often talk to people and say the surface level, the outside narrative is we're going to go sit at a fire pit, right? What am I getting? But I say, what do I get from that? What does that mean to me? What is that saying to me? If it's a sense of connection, if it's a sense of camaraderie, if it's just being able to get and stretch my legs, if it's being able to have somebody who gives me critical feedback, or is it, being around somebody who I get to vent to, right? So one of the things I say is think about the relationships and what do I get from them, right? What are those positive things that I'm receiving from those relationships? And I might not be able to meet with the person, in person right now, but I might be able to do is like Julie said, make a specific card and send it to them and really feel connected and start a pen pal relationship. So what are some other ways that we can move into getting those things that we maybe both want, connection, security, venting, that will help us all feel safe and comfortable? And again, those are probably going to be picking up some new skills on some of the things, so maybe not just doing what we've done in the past.
Julie, what are your thoughts on that difference of opinion? Because that can be tricky.
Oh, I think it's a sticky area. I
Yeah.
think that I'm seeing that so much in my practice. And of course, just, also in my own life, with my own family, just I think COVID is, uncharted territory. We've never been through this before. We've weathered conflicts, in our relationships or with friends, but not around something that's so dangerous. So the thing that we really need the most right now, which might be human connection, is also something that could potentially be dangerous. And so I think if somebody has a looser boundary, a friend around how safe they feel maybe getting together indoors, going to an outdoor, I'm in San Francisco, so, outdoor restaurants, we're not doing indoor dining, going to an outdoor restaurant, and you really miss your friend, but your friend's like, I'm really not comfortable doing that. Sometimes what happens is I think the other person might hear that as their friend telling them they're doing the wrong thing, and
Yeah.
then feelings can get hurt. So I think in a conversation with friends is I just recommend, to have really clear boundaries. And I even share with people in my practice, I tend to work with a lot of new families and new moms that might need caregivers, like a childcare provider, to set up like a checklist almost that you could send off, because everybody has a different definition of what COVID safe is. For some people, that's that they haven't left their house. Other people, it's like, well, we're COVID safe and they might have been fine going to a park or going to eat at a restaurant. Set some real boundaries, kind of where you fill something out even ahead of time, if that's something that works for you, so that it's just kind of, something that's standard, that it's a boundary. And then you can have a conversation about it. Because I think sometimes it's hard for people to be upfront also and be honest, because they're worried about that judgment.
Jeff, here's a question from Susan on YouTube. She asked, do you expect higher incidences of agoraphobia where people will be afraid to leave their homes once the pandemic subsides? Will we ever feel completely safe again?
Great
Good question.
Susan, thank you for that question. I think it's going to vary hugely from one person to the next. It depends what other issues are pinging and ping-ponging in someone's life as to whether or not this is going to reinforce fears that they already have about getting out, about being with people, or is it going to be the reverse, that we can't wait to get outside? I'm a professor. I can't wait to get back in the classroom, and I can imagine the energy we're going to have if we can all sit together again, starting in the fall. So I think there's going to be a huge range of reactions. But I think it's important to think about where's that reaction coming from in any one person, and what's the best way to navigate that going forward. Again, with the belief that connecting with people is the best antidote against a lot of bad stuff.
Well, let's pick up where Julie left off a moment ago. She was talking about boundaries, and DJ, someone wrote to us saying, this year has taught me the importance of setting boundaries. I've realized I need to let some friendships go. Any advice on how to do that when it's time to just cut the cord?
Yeah, if I need to let some relationships go, right? I think a couple of things, right? That everybody's gonna have their own kind of place in that, when this relationship is maybe no longer beneficial to me, right? So I often encourage my clients when we're setting boundaries to kind of reflect on, what's important to me logically, what makes sense mentally, what makes sense emotionally, spiritually, right? And kind of bring all of those into context. There might be times where I really want to be connected with somebody, but it's just, unhealthy, right? There's a difference between support and enabling, right, on that scale. And so what I kind of remind clients, I kind of say this, tongue in cheek, is it's the oxygen mask test, right? It's like you're getting on an airplane, right? It's completely okay to help everybody else, but make sure you have on your oxygen mask first before you're jumping in there, right? So if the relationships are continually draining to you, if they're not putting anything back into you, of course, they're not always going to be balanced, right? But if I continue and feel like I'm being drained from this, it's depleting all of my resources, right? Then take some time for myself. And that can even be a progressive process, right? It doesn't have to be cut that friend off right now and never talk to them. It might be no more hour-long phone calls with that person, right? There's again, slow and steady ways that I can move into creating those healthy boundaries and space. But I think it really starts with paying attention to myself and my needs and how I'm feeling like those are being met and at least heard from that friend.
Great. Jeff, I promised that we would get back to talking about male friendships, right? You gave us sort of some context earlier about how the two differ, right? How male friendships look different. We also got some questions that were particular to male friendships. One viewer asked, spending time with my buddies meant we were getting together to do something. Sound familiar, Jeff? Just getting on a Zoom call is super awkward. Any advice? And I'm coming to you next, Julie.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, it goes back to the men like to do shoulder to shoulder things, activities, and women feel more comfortable in face-to-face activities. We can talk about how two men as a couple, two women as a couple, or a male-female couple may also have couples friendships. But I think it's important then to get together with friends on Zoom and do something. I have a weekly poker game that we now have worked out through Zoom. We're getting together and we're doing something. So I think if you can fit an activity into that, maybe it's not going to be as long as it was. Our poker games used to be 3 hours face to face. Now we're down to 2 hours, but it gives us something once a week to look forward to. And it's an activity. And believe me, I wouldn't be hanging out with these guys if it was just us getting together and talking. We need to have something to do. So I think it's weaving in an activity that you like doing. A lot of younger guys like to do, of course, all kinds of video games, and that's a good way to connect with folks too, with your buds.
Well, similarly, Julie, another viewer asks, she's looking for a way to support her male partner's friendships. She says, I use an app called Marco Polo to stay connected with my close friends during COVID. I've suggested that my fiance do the same, but he just doesn't think that it's something that his friends are going to get behind. So she says, how do I help him stay connected with his friends?
That's a great question. I mean, I wonder also in that, scenario, if her fiance has asked his friends, hey, my fiance is connecting with her friends on this app, Marco Polo. Is that something you guys would like to check out? To kind of, I think sometimes we might just have an assumption or a story we tell ourselves, but then instead of it being a story, we think that it's a fact. And so when that happens, we can really box ourselves in because we're not looking at all of the possibilities. And it might be that you bring it up to your friend and they're like, I haven't heard of that. I don't want to hop on that. But, I would really be interested in, doing an online poker game, or, we both play music. Let's set up a Zoom and, form a band or do something else together. So just throwing the possibility out there can open it up to just having a conversation and a way to connect.
I want to talk about new friends. Any fans of Drake out there? No, he says no new friends, but that's not reality, right? This question, again, another one that really speaks to me as a new Chicagoan. This person writes, I'll be moving well before the pandemic has wound down. How can I make friends in my new location? Yes, panel, how can we make friends? I may or may not have been the one to secretly write this question. Kidding. DJ, you want to take this one?
Not really, but since you called on me, sure. Yeah, right. So again, I think, it's really hard, right? Again, the context of where we're at has changed a lot, right? What we're used to now, those skills, those tools, those things we have in our toolbox, I'm an extrovert. Just put me around people and I can make friends, right? Well, I don't get a chance to be around people anymore. So those things are really going to be a lot more difficult, right? So I think, there's going to be some, looking at my tools and resources, right? Do I have, some people who I know in this new area? Are there, people who I'm going to be working with? Where am I going to be living at, right? I might leverage some resources differently than I normally do, right? Maybe I don't, I'm not a big talk to my work colleagues type of person. Well, now they're the only people I know. So I might want to leverage some of those a little bit more, right? I think, again, everybody has some skills and resources and tools. They have their comfort zones, whether it's, Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or, phone or Zoom. So we all have those areas where we excel at and areas where we might not be as strong, right? So in those areas where I maybe feel like I'm good at, meeting people, connecting, how do I leverage those resources, but also the other resources I have in my life, friends, family, right? If I'm, a lot of people have been doing like book clubs, right? Well, maybe I can join a book club, right? If there's a book I really love, there's, I guarantee you, a book club out there where somebody's reading that now, right? So how do I leverage some of those other things that I do well in life to kind of try to start dipping my toe, getting me closer to some of those things I need? And again, it won't be a 1-for-1, right? It won't be just a direct, well, this thing works out and gets me all the connection I would have gotten otherwise. But again, if it can help me move from, maybe feeling super isolated at a 10 or a 9 and help me feel down to a 7 or 8 because I have a book club that I do once a week or a poker game that I connect to, right? Those are the type of things that then help me deal with the rest of life and make it not feel so overwhelming, right? When I can manage, some of that isolation or the anxiety, then some other things open up more easily at times. So I would say, yeah, leveraging resources. Go ahead.
Yes.
I was just going to add, I think that number one, writ large, it's harder for men to reach out to other men. It's harder for me to pursue a man for a friendship. Yes, if I meet DJ, I may call him up, but if he says, "Oh, Jeff, thanks, I'm not free that day," unless he calls me back, it's going to be very hard for me to pursue him because men often don't feel comfortable with other men that are too emotionally needy. And there's always that balance of how much of my real self do I reveal to a DJ or another guy if I want to try and be his friend, and how do I gauge, how open am I going to be? So I think part of trying to figure out, how to read the other person in terms of making a connection. And just to go back to Julie's comment for 1 second, it's often that women take responsibility for the man in the couple because they're concerned the man doesn't have enough friends, and you will have wives or female partners trying to navigate friendships for their partner/husband.
Yeah, or their partner's friends are their friends' husbands, right? And so you then feel responsible. It's like, I introduced you to Rick or Jim, right? So I've got to make sure you maintain that companionship. I want to squeeze this in for sure, Julie. This is along that boundaries, self-care window of questions. Well, this person says, not a question. I just want you guys to speak to self-care in order to be a good friend. I think that's tremendously important. They said, I'm feeling so drained. It's hard to reach out to others. Also, can you give some tips for maintaining your boundaries in distance hanging out?
I think that's such a great question, and it's something everybody's bumping against. And if we find that we just have nothing left to give and we don't even feel like we have anything left to give to our friends, that can sometimes be a sign of burnout, which we're all kind of vulnerable to right now. And I think it's so important to set a boundary for ourselves. What is something you enjoy doing, that you're going to make time to do? It might not be, the same time you had to do it before, if it, let's say, is, I don't know, playing tennis. Maybe you're not going to be able to do that for, full afternoon, but can you go do it for half hour with, somebody else? If it's reading, can you take half an hour? Whatever it is, something that just kind of fills you up and gives you joy. And then I think there's also, yes, there is a need for self-care, but more so I think there's a real need for community care. Self-care is still something we have to do for ourselves, which means we have to find the energy within ourselves to do the thing. Community care, meaning, I see, my friend DJ, and I know that he is struggling a little bit right now because a lot of, mental health professionals are working overtime, and I know that he really likes chocolate chip cookies. So I'm just going to drop some off and leave them outside his doorstep. And I know my new friend Jeff really likes poker. So, I've read about this, new poker game happening online, and I'm just going to, put a flyer information, in his mailbox or email it to him. So kind of thinking along those lines, and then seeing if there are people in your circle that would really like to commit to doing something like that. Otherwise we could feel like then we're always doing for others and we're giving. But do you have friends that would like to be part of this more community collective where there's community care for each other?
I love how DJ has ended up being everyone's example friend. I think it's because you're an introvert or extrovert, I should say. Julie, sticking with you for a second, answer this question from Gloria. She says, what should you do when someone views your relationship differently than you do? For example, they see you as a must friend. You don't think of them in the must category. Eey.
I think that's rough. That can be so hard. Oftentimes, maybe we don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. And, it might be because of a lot of different reasons that they might see us as their must friend, even if we don't feel the same way. Maybe they don't have as many friends. Maybe they just moved somewhere new and they really connect with this person, but they don't know a lot of other people. Maybe it's just a compatibility issue. I think, if somebody sees us in one way, is that the concern, or is it what they're doing because they see us in this way? If they're
Yeah.
seeing you as a must friend, does that mean they're reaching out more than you're comfortable with? And if that's the case, give yourself permission to set some boundaries. If you're going to hop on the phone with a person, it's okay to say, hey, I can give you a call at, 7 o'clock. I can talk for 20 minutes, so you
Yeah.
set a boundary for yourself. Otherwise, you might start to feel resentful. And then this person who is a just friend starts to feel like you don't want to have them as a friend at all. So what do you need to do to care for yourself?
On those 4 categories that you bring up, time to pivot to a question specifically here for Jeff. Bruce is asking you to address those 4 types when it comes to male friendships. So trust, must, just, rust, and how to manage those in COVID times.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thank you, Bruce. Again, the notion of your must friends are your inner circle. If something catastrophically bad or good happens to me, good being I win the lottery, who am I going to call in the first 24 hours? Who am I going to make sure I immediately tell? Or if someone I love gets a bad health diagnosis, or if I get it, who am I going to call? Those are your really close friends. But we all have a wider circle of people who maybe we see at the gym, maybe we see at parties, maybe we see walking a dog, and we love talking to them, and they are wonderful people, and we trust them. We just can't, include them in our inner circle. And maybe it's part of what Julie was saying. It's a little bit of an imbalance. I may love talking to Julie, but she just doesn't have quite the same time for me. So I realize that, but she's willing to talk with me while we're walking our dogs, and I can open up to her, but I'm never going over to her house. She's never coming over to my house, but I really trust her. Then there are, again, the acquaintances at work who you may go out. When we still went to work, you may just sort of know them. And again, they're the old friends that maybe could be your closest friends, but they're often people left over from your childhood. And trying to understand this, just to make one other point, no relationship is ever 100% balanced. Somebody is I'm going to love my wife an inch more than she loves me, or she's going to love me more, or we're going to want to spend our time together not quite as much the same. And the whole notion of time and how any relationship balances time for themselves, for their own safekeeping, for their own well-being, and with their partner if they have a significant other, or their children, or their family, or their friends, or their activities. That's a constant negotiation with those that you're close to.
Yeah. DJ, I'm going to lump these 2 questions that came in. They're from viewers with friends that are in special circumstances. So one, for instance, says, I've got a friend with dementia. What are some ways that I can support her and her family from a distance? Another person writes, I have a friend expecting her first child. So do I. How best can I support her yet still keep her safe from COVID?
Yeah, really, really, really good questions, right? And I think kind of for this, it's hitting a little bit for me on what Julie said earlier about that community support, right? I think of remembering and balancing in that relationship, right? That if I want to be there to support my friend, that might not necessarily look like getting to do exactly what I want, right? That might not look like getting to throw a baby shower or getting to show up, right? But again, reaching out to them and just saying like, although times are different, right? Usually maybe I'm a great gift giver. I'm really good at this, or I know exactly what to say. But times are a little bit different. It's off balance, right? How do I help and support you? I remind clients of that all the time. As a therapist, very rarely / none am I perfect on everything and knowing everything all the time, right? But sometimes especially if we're talking about supporting people who are going through struggles, right? Just knowing somebody's there, right? They might not even be at the point where they know what they need yet. But just telling them, hey, I'm here for you and I could be here to support you, right? Again, moving into that dialogue, right? Kind of that same thing. I'm projecting in my head that I need to be the perfect friend and know exactly what to do and exactly what the moment and exactly what to say. And the truth about a friendship is that's the whole reason I had it, that I don't have to do it all in my head all the time, right? So again, different context, different environment, right? But how do I move into, helping, meeting my friend where their needs, understand those might be a little bit different than what I normally like to do or what I normally might need, right? But again, I'm probably gonna feel some joy as well, right? For sending out those cookies or sending out the chess set or doing whatever that is. And so again, right, might not get back to where we usually are, but how do we get closer, right? How do I help meet them where they are? And again, I don't have to put so much pressure on myself to do it perfect or know it all, right? We can have conversation.
And I think circling back to where we started, where we had folks sort of rating where they were, on a scale of 1 to 5, I think no matter whether you're a 1 or I think it was a 0.05 as Polly put it, or, a 4 or 5, I think our hearts are in the right place. I think we want to maintain these friendships, but we're just, at different levels of working through this pandemic. And some of us just aren't capable right now. So once again, Julie, if you can remind us here, Sydney's got a question about how to deal with guilt about failing to keep up with long distance friends, given the pandemic burnout that some of us are experiencing.
I think just extending ourselves, I think we are so hard on ourselves. One question is an exercise. If a friend came to you and said the same thing, I feel like I'm such a bad friend. I haven't even reached out to my friend who lives across the country, during the pandemic, because I've been, working so hard and I'm just like so tired. What would you say to them? Chances are you would never tell them, oh yeah, you're a bad friend, you should feel so good. So that's just a great exercise. It's a way to get a little bit of distance between that thought and the emotion, can help us get a little bit of perspective. And then I think also to talk about it, if we're feeling really guilty or maybe we're feeling shamed, we feel like we're bad at something. That's going to make us want to kind of isolate and hide and not share that part of ourselves. So who's in your inner circle that you can talk with? Because chances are they're feeling the same way, and you might be able to just find some support, lean on each other's shoulders, and also maybe find some solutions. So.
And as we wrap, I just want to hear from each of you here. A viewer asked, can you please provide the names of COVID grief support groups, since the grief and the loss part of this whole pandemic is so unique and heartbreaking at the same time. Jeff, you first.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I don't have any resources for COVID grief support groups. I will say very briefly that life is full of affection, ambivalence, and ambiguity. And it's important to get comfortable with all three of those in any relationship. But I'll pass to the other folks about where to make referrals.
Sure, DJ.
Sure. So I work with support staff as one education director. So if you're in the hospitality service industry, even if you're not, you can go to our website. There's a list of resources and referrals. Also, the National Institutes of Mental Health has a Chicago chapter with a 24-hour helpline that you can call, and they can tell you about finding a therapist, finding a support group, finding support for, whatever, psychiatry, any of that stuff, right? So it's a base where you can go to get some information, and they should have some Chicago context for you as far as like what part of the city you're in, stuff like that, to be able to give some information. So that's one resource I pass to clients.
Any resources you can share, Julie?
I think in terms of support groups, there's so many options now that we're able to be on Zoom, and so a great place to start if you're connected with your family physician, asking for a referral, looking on a database like Psychology Today might list some grief support groups, reading articles about just COVID related grief. Oftentimes there's some, resources right at the end of the article. And then I do know that during COVID, a lot of people are just using social media in pretty creative ways. So I know of, people that do grief support, and they're using Twitch as a platform to offer kind of, a support group, where they're doing a talk on Clubhouse. And so looking at those channels, because sometimes people might not want to participate in a group, but they want to feel the support from people. So think of what you need, and then what kind of platform, can help meet that need, or what kind of service.
That's wonderful.
Sasha, can I add one more? I just remembered as well.
Absolutely.
At Pinnacle, we are also doing a couple of COVID support groups and infidelity support groups. the COVID support group that we're doing is run by 2 female therapists of color. So I've had several clients reach out to me saying they're looking for like a therapist of color or something like that. So that could also be an option if somebody's looking for that as well. That one at Pinnacle.
Wonderful. DJ Watson is an associate marriage and family therapist with Pinnacle Counseling right here in Chicago. Dr. Jeffrey Greif is a professor at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. And Dr. Julie Fraga is a psychologist and writer in San Francisco. Thank you all so much for joining us and for answering our viewers' questions tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Now that we have talked about connecting with our friends, let's draw upon that expert advice that we just heard and figure out what we can do together safely during COVID. So joining me now is Salem Julin, the listings coordinator for the Chicago Reader. Hi, Salem. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Salem, it's pretty safe to say Zoom fatigue is real. We're sick and tired of Zoom happy hours at this point. We've heard so much from folks longing for that feeling of just getting cute, getting dressed, doing your hair, doing your makeup, getting a nice outfit, going out to do something with your friends. What have you got for us that might help us to recreate that virtually?
Well, you know, there's a lot of virtual events that have been going on over the last couple of months. And while most of your viewers are probably there's a significant amount that are reluctant to really get dressed anymore because we've noticed that these sweatpants are entirely too comfortable. There are some ways that you can plan to attend some of the same virtual events with your friends so you have something new to talk about the next time that you get together online or you get on that phone call. The music community here is really one of the places where the COVID has just hit it hard. But we've got a lot of resilient venues here that have been bringing us some events on a weekly basis for some of them. One of the places that I've been going to is Audiotree. And for those of you familiar with the venues, Lincoln Hall and Shuba's on the north side, rock and roll, and sometimes jazz. Audiotree is the parent company, and they were an early adopter to some live streaming online. They do recording services, so they already had a lot of the equipment and the expertise, and they've been doing a series of concerts that are shot with the band and just the people who are doing the camera work inside Lincoln Hall. So the view is like going to a concert there, and then it's live streamed through audiotree.tv. In fact, I think the next one coming up is the family band sort of Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. It's him, his son, and some of their other family members called the Nielsen Trust. So that's coming up tomorrow night.
I want to remind before you continue, Salem, I want to remind our viewers that we want to hear from you too. If you do want to share, put it in the comments. We'd love to share it with the rest of the gang here and get some more ideas. Go ahead, Salem, because some folks are actually comfortable at this point with doing things in person, right? And so
sure.
What else do you have for them?
Sure. There's a lot of things that are going to be good for maybe if you have a small group of people and maybe you've been in a bubble together over these last few months. Maybe some of you are feeling more confident about being in person with masks and a little bit of distancing. You can actually rent some of the venues that you may have gone to pre-COVID and have a little space for yourself. The Music Box Theater, which is an incredible place to see a movie, is offering some deep discounts right now for people who want to rent out one of their theaters and watch a movie with your bubble. You can rent the small theater for a smaller amount than probably ever before. Bring a movie and they'll screen it for you, and it's you and 12 of your friends.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really unique opportunity. And especially for those of us who already kind of, like I said, have that group that we feel comfortable going out and doing things with, it's a great opportunity to have a really unique experience. So maybe you have, you know, a lot of kids that you're trying to get out of the house. That might be worth it just to get everybody out the door.
And I feel like once I try something like this, I'll never want to see a movie another way again. Right.
Right. Yeah, that's the lovely part and the danger about going out in public right now is that the city is a lot emptier looking than before. So at some point we'll have to adjust to all of us bustling together. Another place that's doing that in the suburbs is Fitzgeralds, which is a long time music venue. Fitzgeralds will let you rent their main space for a movie night. A dozen people capped, and they'll have a bartender on staff that's only there to leave the drinks at the end of the bar for you and take your orders from afar. So you enter and you're basically not in touch with anybody other than your group. Fitzgerald's is doing a similar thing with their fire pit area in their patio. So you can have that for a couple of hours along with your group. It might be a good idea for people who are looking for a little bit of a road trip out to the suburbs. It's only about a 20-minute drive for most people, and to get outside and enjoy it. You might want to layer up right now, but
yeah, might want to layer up, except for this week. We are warming up a little bit. Yeah, so I want to throw in this comment here from Becca. She's weighed in and she says, I've been doing dial walk and talks. My friends and I plan to call each other at a certain time, walk around our neighborhood and catch up. It's been lovely. Lots of flexibility. Is that something you're hearing, Salem, folks?
That's totally, yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people have been trying to take advantage of is, you know, we all have to get out and do a little bit of physical exercise anyway. Why not, you know, take a walk? And I think what comes down to it is something that that everyone was saying before about figuring out who the planners are in your friend group. And some people may have to dive a little bit into that in order to actually get to see people. But planning a hike together is one of the things that's really great about, you know, I mean, you can kind of meet all of your friends halfway in that. People who are not really into the idea yet of going to meet you at a restaurant or a bar. They've just recently been reopened here in the city of Chicago. Maybe they'll meet you at the Forest Preserve. You take a half-an-hour walk and just chat a little bit in the parking lot before you leave, you know, and just making those kinds of plans, I think is essential. I think for my group of friends, just even talking about what we might plan to do in the next couple of weeks, you know, that's usually enough excitement for us to, you know, get a conversation going for a bit. So
I didn't realize how much I enjoyed walking until COVID. You know, that's like the one good thing that's come out of it for me. Like I volunteered to go walking with my daughters last weekend. I was like, what's come over me? Who am I? I don't even recognize myself anymore. We walked for like almost 90 minutes. But you know, it made us feel so good once we came back home. It was like, wow, we just went somewhere. And I mean, really, we did a circle around our block in North Chicago. For those of us, Salem, who want to keep it virtual, do you have suggestions of what to do besides FaceTime or Zoom?
Yes, there are some things that you can do that actually were mentioned before. You know, figure out what kinds of card games you like with a group of people. There's lots of places where you can go. Meetup online has a lot of groups that have kind of shifted to doing weekly trivia together, weekly poker, as was mentioned before, pinochle, those kinds of things. You know, kind of dive into your hobbies, and you're sure to find a group of like-minded people who do want to do that every Thursday night or whatever it is. Airbnb has actually been another website that's kind of shifted to, it's still launching, but again, if you plan your event with your friends around, you know, Thursday at 7, we've all basically bought a ticket to this thing, and then we'll stay on for a half hour, or we'll call each other on the phone and talk about what we just experienced. So when you go to Airbnb, there's a lot of people who are doing things like how to make the perfect sangria class. It'll be a half an hour on Airbnb. You buy the ticket, and then there's a live workshop. The Old Town School of Folk Music up in Lincoln Square is doing a similar thing with some of their workshops. It's kind of an extension for them because they've always, had workshops and classes going on for people who want to learn how to play different instruments. But now that we're all stuck at home, they're taking advantage of that to some extent, and they'll have a couple of one-time specific workshops that should appeal to everybody in your household that maybe wants to learn more about a specific kind of music, or how can I play this banjo that's just been sitting around here for months and months. So there's some other ideas there.
You're giving me hope, Salem. There's more to do than than just Zoom happy hours, which is where we started with this conversation. So I'm feeling really good. Salem Kalo-Julin is the listings coordinator for the Chicago Reader. Salem, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me again.
Now that's all the time that we have. But of course, I want to thank you for watching. You can join me tomorrow at 11 a.m. for Reset at 91.5 FM, or you can stream us live at wbez.org. Or as my boss likes to say, you can ask your smart speaker to play WBEZ. You'll find us there at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Now, we have also dropped a link to a survey in the comments, so we'd love it if you could just take a minute before you go. Let us know what you thought of tonight's program, what you'd like to see next, what else you'd like us to talk about, and we'll make sure that we take a look at that, and we would really appreciate your time doing that. Again, I am Sasha Ann Simons. We will talk very soon. Good night.